Hey, welcome back to the eDrum Workshop. I'm Luke, and today I'm reviewing the Lemon LE-HHC12 hi-hats. This is Lemon's answer to, well, copy of Roland's VH13 hi-hats. They're 12 inches across with a two-piece design consisting of a dual-zone cymbal pad on top and a controller built into a plate on the bottom to mimic an acoustic hi-hat. They're available through the manufacturer via Alibaba with or without the Lemon logo, and they're currently priced at $129, which at the time of recording converts to around €129 or £110. As ever, when purchasing from overseas, you might also have to factor in high shipping costs. I bought mine alongside Lemon's other hi-hat controller as I wanted to compare them, and this is the first time that I've had to pay VAT and customs charges when they arrived in the UK. I think that was because of the total cost of the items, but it still worked out cheaper than pretty much any other two-piece hi-hats on the market, so that will still be a plus for many people. So the Lemon brand has become very popular in the last few years, thanks in part to these prices, their large sizes and their general quality. I reviewed the 15-inch and 18-inch ride cymbals last year, and I had very little criticism. And on that note, I actually do find it quite weird that they decided to only bring out these 12-inch hi-hats. Obviously, the VH13 hi-hats are also 12-inch, but I genuinely think they'd have absolutely cleaned up if they just came straight out with a 14-inch version. When it comes to 14-inch rubber electronic two-piece hi-hats, these all range from expensive to very expensive, with the Roland and F-Note ones being locked into their brand's ecosystems. A low-cost 14-inch alternative would definitely prove popular, so I do wonder if there might be plans for scaling these up in the future. In the box, it was nice to find that the hi-hats also came with a clutch and two rotation stopper attachments with different diameter holes, along with an Allen key for them. The usefulness of the second stopper will become apparent later on, but it's always nice to see budget brands taking different hardware into consideration and including multiple options in the box. There's also a set of parts in the box for attaching the bottom plate to your hi-hat stand to stop it rotating. I believe that this is another design cue taken from Roland's two-piece hi-hats. A short stereo jack cable is also supplied, which is used to link the top cymbal and the controller together, and assembly instructions are also included. The design of these hi-hats is great. I bought the version without the logo, and it has a raised ridge in the rubber along the playable edge so that you know which way round to position it. It's also quite light, which is usually desirable with rubber hi-hat pads because it keeps the pedal response similar to what you might expect with acoustic hi-hats. The bottom plate has a similar kind of faux lathing effect on it as the rubber on the top cymbal, which is nice enough for a plastic plate that you'll never look at once it's fitted. And there's also a felt strip all the way around the controller edge to help soften the volume of the two pieces coming together. The build quality of the HHC12 hi-hats is comparable to Lemon's other cymbals. They generally look and feel pretty similar to their Roland counterparts, though the rubber that Lemon uses is noticeably thinner and has more of a matte finish. This means that they don't feel quite as premium in the hand or under the stick as the rubber used on, say, a Roland or Yamaha cymbal, and stick marks tend to show up more easily. This is all understandable considering their price, in my opinion, and that's not to say that they feel bad. They feel pretty great, but just not quite up there with the best. Also, due to the thinner rubber, they are a little bit louder under the stick than some alternatives might be, but all two-piece hi-hats are a bit loud anyway thanks to the bottom plate and the pedal action. So I don't really think you'd notice a huge difference between these and something like the VH13 when playing. Their long-term durability is a little bit more up for debate. Unfortunately, since I reviewed the 15-inch ride cymbals, I have actually broken one of them. A chunk of plastic broke off the edge. The other 15-inch ride and the 18-inch ride that I own have both held up fine though, despite being used quite heavily, so your mileage may vary. There's always going to be a trade-off between price and build quality, and I have actually broken a Roland cymbal before, so it could just be me. Setting these up is pretty simple, but I did run into a couple of hiccups. First, you need to mount the stop clamp onto your hi-hat stand following the measurements on the supplied instructions, then place the bottom plate controller onto your stand. The Velcro straps are then looped through the holes on the stop clamp and the controller unit to secure things in place. This is where I hit my first very mild stumbling block because of the design of my Tama Speed Cobra hi-hat stand. The tilter mechanism is quite bulky and the felt cushion is fixed onto the stand rather than being removable. The controller is supposed to sit flat on the bare plastic, but because I can't remove the felt, the stop clamp ended up being mounted a bit further away from the controller than it's supposed to. However, the Velcro straps had enough length to make it work. Next, the clutch needs to be attached to the top cymbal. This was a little bit fiddly with the recessed Allen key grommet, but nothing too difficult. Then I hit my next issue. The clutch that came with it didn't fit onto my hi-hat rod. Fortunately, this is where the second rotation stopper that was included came in handy. This one has a larger diameter hole, meaning that I could attach this stopper to my own wider hi-hat clutch. This might be something that you need to keep in mind if you don't have access to another clutch, as many stands have different diameter rods, though according to Digital Drummer magazine, Lemon are supposedly including a wider clutch assembly as standard going forward, so hopefully that won't be much of an issue now. Once the top pad is assembled, the pad goes onto the hi-hat rod and the small link cable can be connected between the hi-hat pad's output and the controller's link input. Getting the spacing right is also useful. The bottom of the clutch is supposed to sit just on top of the controller's plunger without putting any pressure on it while your foot is up. You could choose to mount it higher for a larger gap, but this would mean that there's quite a bit of travel before the controller actually does anything. Then you attach a cable from the hi-hat output on the controller to the hi-hat input on the module, and another from the hi-hat control output to the hi-hat control input on your module. Let's just take a moment now to discuss compatibility. Not all electronic hi-hat pads or controllers are compatible with all electronic drum modules. Since this cymbal is basically a copy of the Roland VH13, at first it would only work properly with modules that can fully support the VH13, such as higher end Roland modules like the TD-30, TD-27 and TD-50 or 50X, the Pearl Mimic Pro or the Gava modules. In order to properly set up this kind of hi-hats, you're meant to use some form of offset function on the module to configure the close position, which also allows for a tight close position when you press down and go past this point. Because there's no offset function for the VH10 or the VH11 settings on a Roland module, it wouldn't work properly with those presets. Some Roland modules and other brand modules don't have a VH13 preset at all, so you would have been out of luck. However, I was sent a second controller due to an issue that I'll get into shortly, and the second controller came with this 3mm rubber washer. Now this doesn't seem like much, but it actually creates enough additional travel to push the plunger right down to the bottom without the additional pressure on the pedal, and this actually allows you to use this with a VH10 or VH11 preset on a Roland module, or on another module that can support that kind of controller. So with or without the washer, I've had it running on all of my modules. It's pretty crazy to think that a 3mm washer is all that's needed to add extra compatibility, but ultimately the plunger is the same kind of mechanism across all of these hi-hats. It's only really the fact that the bottom plate stops the plunger from going all the way down that makes these different to the one-piece hi-hats. This washer just bypasses the need for the offset by allowing the plunger to be fully depressed by the time the two pieces meet. I'm pretty certain it won't work properly with Yamaha modules due to their different hi-hat controller design, but if you have one of these modules or your module supports Roland's FD pedals or the VH10 or 11, you'll probably get it to work if you have the washer. Since this washer came in the box with my second controller unit, I assume that it will be packaged in with all HHC12 controllers from now on. So that's another tick in the box for Lemon when it comes to improving things over time. If you don't get one with yours, then just look for a washer or a gasket with these measurements. So we know that it works with these modules, but how well does it actually trigger and play? Well, to begin with, things were pretty positive. I set the hi-hats up as a VH13 on my Pearl Mimic Pro, went through all of the usual calibration steps for the controller, the sensitivity and the other settings. The controller was responsive and the pad was picking up all of my strokes from soft to hard. Then, as I played more, I noticed that I wasn't hearing any bow sounds from the hi-hat, just edge sounds. I swapped modules to the TD-50X and had the same problem. I recently put out another video about how I worked out what this problem was and passed all of the information along to Lemon for them to work on a fix, so I won't repeat all of the fine details here. The short version is that there was a problem with the internal wiring between the link input on the controller and the hi-hat output on the controller. They sent me that second controller, but I had the same issue with that. Eventually, they developed a new internal cable that I've since fitted into my controller, and the problem has been completely fixed. This new internal cable will now be the standard part, so if you're looking to buy one, this issue should no longer happen. Since this problem was resolved, it's been working really well. Like other Lemon cymbals, this hi-hat pad does have quite a hot signal, even compared to Roland cymbals, so depending on your module you might need to bring down the gain or sensitivity. This sensitivity is actually a bit of a double-edged sword. The spring on my pedal is quite strong even when it's at the slackest because it's a speed cobra. It's meant to be a fast pedal, but that does mean that taking my foot off the pedal too quickly was causing some additional triggers because of the ferocity of the pedal's action. This is a problem that can happen with pretty much any moving hi-hat trigger, and dialing it out can take a little bit of tweaking. Eventually, I found a balance of threshold settings and spring tension that I was happy with. There is unfortunately a bit of a hot spot on this cymbal pad too. The piezo is located in the centre of the bow zone right near to the bell. If you do hit directly on it, there's quite a spike in velocity. There have been hotspots on all of the Lemon cymbals that I've tried so far, so it's not that surprising. I didn't really notice it right away because of how I had my pad positioned and where I normally play. You can use velocity curves to balance it out a bit, but it's pretty difficult to completely remove it because it's part of the design. As always, it's a balance between price and functionality, so you need to decide if this is the kind of compromise that you're willing to make for this price. If I really wanted to split hairs, I would quite like a little bit more travel on the controller in general. Maybe if the plunger was about 50% longer, it would be quite nice to have a bit of a larger gap between the two pads, but it does work fine as it is. Some people might want a playing surface that's larger than 12 inches, and I do think that Lemon have missed a trick there, but I do honestly think that the size is a pretty reasonable playing surface for the most part. Ultimately, I just genuinely didn't think I'd enjoy using a two-piece hi-hat as much as I have. It was a little bit annoying to go through the whole troubleshooting process to get these hi-hats where they needed to be, but overall the manufacturer has responded to and fixed a problem pretty quickly, as well as improving the out-of-box experience and compatibility with their updates to the rotation stoppers and the inclusion of the 3mm washer. There's always a bit of a worry when you buy from a budget company, especially if they're not in your home country, that any issues that you run into might take a long time to be resolved or even be ignored. Finding out that their customer service is so responsive inspires confidence in a budget brand, and that's really great to see. When you add that to a product that generally plays well for a low price, it becomes pretty easy to recommend the Lemon LE-HHC12 if you want a two-piece hi-hat on a tight budget. If you're looking for other ways to bring your electronic drums closer to an acoustic kit, this 18-inch electronic ride cymbal shootout will help you pick a larger ride that suits your module. Or if it's better sounds that you're after, head over to my store at the eDrumworkshop.com for kits that include real acoustic samples. I'll see you in the next video. Cheers!